Welcome to this explainer. We are stepping right into one of the most volatile and, honestly, most defining moments in world history. Picture this. It's the year 632 AD, and a sudden, devastating shockwave has just hit the city of Medina. The Prophet Muhammad has passed away after a severe illness at just 63 years old. Now, for the Muslim community, this wasn't just the loss of a leader. It was an unimaginable fracturing of their entire world. The grief was literally so profound, so paralyzing, that a lot of people just flat out refused to believe it was even real.
Right in the middle of this absolute chaos, Umar, one of the Prophet's closest and definitely most formidable companions, he actually draws his sword right there in the Prophet's mosque. He's threatening anyone who even dares to say the Prophet is dead. But then Abu Bakr steps forward. He walks up to the pulpit, completely masking his own immense grief, and delivers these exact words. He says them with such immense gravity, and this powerful declaration instantly grounds a completely panicked community. Umar, a guy known for his immense physical strength, later said his legs literally just gave out beneath him when he heard those words. The reality had set in. But with that reality came a massive, immediate existential question.
Section 1. The Succession Crisis and the First Caliph.
So the sudden passing of the Prophet leaves this massive political vacuum, right? And a crisis of succession kicks off almost immediately. There's this urgent meeting in Medina between the Ansar, the local Medinans, and the Quraysh, which was the Prophet's tribe from Mecca. And what happens here literally lays the foundation for the theological landscape of the modern Islamic world. Now, what's really interesting about this breakdown is how it shaped history. Today, 87% of the global Muslim population are Sunni, and they hold the perspective that Abu Bakr was rightfully chosen through mutual consultation at that very meeting. Conversely, 13% are Shia, and they maintain that Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, had actually been previously appointed at a place called Ghadir Khum. But in that specific historical moment, the consensus fell to Abu Bakr, declaring him the first caliph or successor.
Imagine taking on the leadership of all Arabia. It's an unimaginable burden. Yet Abu Bakr's approach was just remarkably humble. Literally, the very next day after becoming caliph, people saw him heading to the market to sell clothes. Why? Because he needed to feed his family. When the community insisted on allocating him a state salary so he could actually focus on governing, he agreed, but he had one strict condition. He insisted his salary be set exactly equal to that of a common laborer. He argued that if a laborer couldn't survive on it, well then the laborer's wages should be raised, not the caliph's. Truly incredible.
Section 2. The Ridda Wars. The Empire Fractures.
Now, Abu Bakr didn't exactly get a peaceful honeymoon phase. The second news of the Prophet's death spread, massive rebellions just spread like wildfire across the Arabian Peninsula. The young caliphate is suddenly surrounded by three simultaneous existential threats. First off, a bunch of tribes refused to pay the zakat. That's the mandatory charity tax. They argued their treaty was strictly with the Prophet. Second, seeing all this political instability, several opportunistic leaders pop up and declare themselves as new prophets. And third, you've got the ancient Roman and Persian empires looming right on the borders. His advisors are begging him, please compromise, just let the zakat issue slide for now. But Abu Bakr, he was absolutely uncompromising. He famously declared that if a tribe withheld even a single piece of rope that they used to tie a zakat camel during the Prophet's time, he would fight them for it. He knew that compromising on those core pillars would cause the whole religion to collapse. So to reclaim the peninsula, Abu Bakr pulls off this absolute masterclass in military strategy. He doesn't just send out one army. No, he brilliantly divides the available Muslim forces into 11 distinct military divisions, and he deploys them simultaneously in all directions across the desert, sending clear letters of warning before they ever engaged. It was this massive, incredibly synchronized effort to just stamp out the rebellions all at once.
This all climaxes at the Battle of Yamama, and this is against the absolute most dangerous of the false prophets, a guy named Musaylima. The Muslims are facing a staggering numerical disadvantage here. We're talking 13,000 Muslim troops led by the legendary general Khalid bin Walid going up against a massive rebel force of 40,000. 13,000 versus 40,000. No way, right? The battle was incredibly brutal. The Muslim forces were initially pushed all the way back to their camps. But then Khalid bin Walid orchestrates this desperate, heroic rally. He breaks the enemy lines, pushing Musaylima's army to retreat into a highly fortified, walled enclosure. It became known as the Garden of Death, and that is where the rebel army was finally defeated.
Section 3. Compiling the Qur'an. Preserving the Word.
Okay, so the victory at Yamama saved the caliphate. But the Muslims quickly realized it came with an absolutely terrifying cost. And this is a cost that would force a decision that permanently changed human history. In that one single brutal battle, 700 Hafiz were killed. Now, a Hafiz is someone who has memorized the entire Quran by heart. You have to remember, at this time, the Quran wasn't a single bound book. It was memorized by the companions and written down on scattered fragments of leather, bone, and leaves. Seeing 700 memorizers wiped out in one single day absolutely terrified Amr. He realized if these wars keep going, the actual words of their scripture could be lost forever. So he rushes to Abu Bakr and urgently pleads with him to compile the Quran into a single, unified manuscript.
The preservation of the Quran as we know it today is a direct result of this exact crisis. Let's move through this timeline and see how it builds. First, Abu Bakr tasks Zayd bin Thabit, who was a brilliant young scribe, with the monumental job of gathering every written verse and cross-referencing it with the memorizers. This first complete manuscript was guarded by Abu Bakr. Then it was passed to Umar, and then to his daughter Hafsa. Now, decades later, as the empire is expanding to places way out like the Russian borders and Armenia, soldiers from different regions start arguing over different regional dialects of the text. So, to prevent a major fracture, the third Caliph, Uthman, uses that original manuscript to standardize the Quran into the Meccan dialect. And that is the exact version read by billions of people around the world today.
Section 4. Challenging the Superpowers. Alright, so with Arabia unified and the scripture preserved, Abu Bakr makes a completely audacious decision. He looks outward. He sets his sights directly on the undisputed global superpowers of the era, the Roman and Persian empires. Now, what he knew was that these two behemoths had just spent the last 700 years locked in devastating wars with each other. Sure, they were massive, but they were totally exhausted. On the ground, the tactical reality was pretty stark. The Persian and Roman armies were heavily armored and highly professional, but they were fundamentally slow-moving. The Arab armies? They were lightly armored and arguably way less equipped. But Khalid bin Walid recognized his ultimate tactical advantage. He turned a lack of heavy armor into unmatched, lightning-fast desert mobility. He was literally about to use the brutal terrain of the desert as a weapon.
When the Persians sent 3 massive armies, we're talking 25,000 men each, to crush him, Khalid doesn't just fight them all together. No way. He gathers his generals and calculates exactly where those 3 enemy armies would be 2 weeks into the future. Then he divides his 15,000 troops into 3 separate groups and has them completely disappear into the harsh Iraqi desert. Think about that. Without radios, without modern communication, they navigate this brutal terrain and converge simultaneously in the dead of night. They completely annihilated the Persian armies one by one long before they could ever join forces. It's a maneuver military academies are literally still studying today.
But here's the thing. Khalid wasn't just some military genius. He totally understood hearts and minds. As he's conquering these Persian territories, he isn't pillaging. Instead, he rolls out a brilliant economic and social strategy. He immediately restores seized properties to the local populations. He sets up courts for swift, equal justice. And honestly, perhaps most importantly, he sets the jizya, that's the tax for non-Muslims, significantly lower than the crippling taxes the Persians had been forcing them to pay. He won over the conquered population so effectively that a lot of the locals actually began actively spying on the Persians for the Muslims. Talk about a real game changer.
It is truly breathtaking to step back and just look at the sheer scale of what happened in a couple of short years. Think about it. A community on the absolute brink of total collapse, fractured by grief, completely surrounded by rebels, and staring down ancient superpowers. And somehow, they survive. But they don't just survive. They compile a scripture that defines the lives of billions today, and they systematically dismantle empires that had ruled for millennia. So, what does this all mean? How did the decisions made by Abu Bakr and his companions in these brief, volatile years permanently draw the borders and beliefs of the modern world? It's a question that completely redefines how we view both the fragility and the sheer power of history. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.